We're continuing our series, The Medium is the Message. Today we're talking about TV. TV can definitely make you famous, and you need a thick skin. Join me with my guest, Dr. Christina Madison, on this episode of the Speaking Your Brand podcast. More and more women are making an impact by starting businesses, running for office, and speaking up for what matters. With my background as a TV political analyst, entrepreneur, and speaker, I interview and coach purpose-driven women to shape their brands, grow their companies, and become recognized as influencers in their field. This is Speaking Your Brand, your place to learn how to persuasively communicate your message to your audience. Hi, and welcome to the Speaking Your Brand podcast. I'm your host, Carol Cox. If you've ever thought that you would like to be on TV as a contributing expert, or if you think you're not qualified, which you are, you're going to get so much out of this episode. We're continuing our series called The Medium is the Message, and I've been having so much fun with it. This is the fourth episode in the 7-part series that we're doing. The first episode was all about podcasting. The second was about public speaking as a medium and what makes that unique. Last week was all about video, and today we're talking about TV. TV as a platform can quickly propel your visibility and your credibility like very few other channels can. Since 2005, I've appeared way too many times to count on Orlando area news stations as a Democratic political analyst. And being on TV can definitely turn you into a mini celebrity, as we talk about in this episode, because people who see you on the news start recognizing you when you're out and about in your community, say at the store. And this is a true story. During the 2016 election cycle, I was on the news frequently. I was on retainer on contract for our NBC affiliate here in Orlando. And I remember one time I was at the store and it was a Saturday. I was in my yoga clothes, hair in a ponytail, no makeup on. And the clerk, who had seen me before I would come into that store often, she kind of looked at me, cocked her head to the side, and slowly and with a hint of uncertainty said to me, "Did I see you on TV the other night?" And I was like, well, yes, you did. And I looked a lot more put together then. So being on TV gives you this built-in credibility and authority because so few people get the opportunity. It is one of those last gatekeepers, along with traditional book publishing, which we're going to talk about in a subsequent episode in the series, because the audience assumes that if they're seeing you on their television, you've been selected and vetted as an expert. Being on TV has all of these advantages. It can also have a downside, especially as a woman, and even more so as a woman of color. I know I experienced a lot of sexism in the public comments as a woman on TV, and my guest today, Dr. Christina Madison, has as well. She's the founder and CEO of the Public Health Pharmacist, a public health consulting firm. And since the start of the pandemic in January 2020, she has appeared over 200 times on TV. I met Christina recently on a consult call. When I learned about her background, I knew I had to have her on the podcast for this episode all about TV. So Christina and I talk about the benefits of being on TV, and then we do share the real challenges we've both faced as women having a public presence and a public voice. Christina is also a woman of color, so she has faced the double whammy of both sexism and racism. And as we say in our conversation, just never read the comments. And we both share some experiences that we've had. And so being on TV is definitely not for the faint of heart. You do need to develop a thick skin. And so hopefully we don't dissuade you from wanting to do it because there are so many benefits, especially how important it is to have representation of women and women of color in the media. Christina and I get into very practical strategies that you can use, tips for working with TV stations so they keep calling you back. Christina shares how she got her very first TV appearance and how she prepared for it. We talk about what makes TV unique as a medium, what TV wants. It wants visuals, it wants sound bites, it wants quotes that can be used and shared in just a few seconds. And really, it's a mass market. So you need mass market information that you're sharing to a lay audience. We also talk about the importance of your topic being newsworthy and how to find an angle to pitch your topic to your local news stations to make it newsworthy. And you definitely can pitch yourself to be on TV. Back earlier this year, In episode number 209, this was in January 2021, I chatted with one of our speaking coaches and media coaches, Marie Feedback. She works with our clients in the Thought Leader Academy. And we talked about the differences in doing interviews for podcasts, TV, and publications. And one of the things that the women get when they go through our Thought Leader Academy is Marie does a workshop for them all about pitching their local news stations. We are currently in enrollment for our next Thought Leader Academy. If you are interested in joining us, you can get all of the details, including pricing, by going to speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/academy. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. At Speaking Your Brand, we help women entrepreneurs and professionals elevate themselves from experts into thought leaders. Our mission is to get more women in positions of influence and power, whether it's on stages, in the media, in our businesses, on boards, in our communities, and in politics, because we know it's through women's stories and visibility and representation that we challenge the status quo and change existing systems. We primarily do this through our Thought Leader Academy program. It's a 4-month structured curriculum with live group Zoom calls and one-on-one coaching so that you start developing your thought leadership message and container and create your signature talks. It is an incredible program. We are currently in our 3rd group right now. Our 4th group is starting in January 2022, and enrollment is now open. You can get all of the details, including pricing, by going to speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/academy. The first step is to submit the application form, and then we'll set up a time for a consult call because I'd love to chat with you, get to know more about you, your goals, and to make sure that the Thought Leader Academy is the best fit for you. The women who join us in the Thought Leader Academy, they're really looking to up-level what they're doing with their speaking and thought leadership. They know they need help figuring out what is their best thought leadership message, what is the idea that's in there, how can they put themselves out there consistently with their visibility and their message. They need help creating their signature talk, which is exactly what we help them to do in the Academy. And they also know that they want to start getting paid to speak, or they want to raise the fees that they're charging. And they know that they need certain things in place in order to make that happen. We have an incredible group of women going through the Thought Leader Academy right now, and I love that they come from a wide variety of industries and backgrounds. We have sales consultants, copywriters, executive leadership coaches, women who work in pharmacy, women who work in science, women who work in fintech, just a wide variety of backgrounds and interests. And it really makes for really great conversations within our group Zoom calls so that they can help each other from different perspectives. So it's not just everyone's in the same industry and you're kind of getting your bubble of what's working and what's possible for you and thinking bigger. And really having these variety of industries and backgrounds just makes our conversations so powerful. Again, if you would like to join us, go to speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/academy. It's a 4-month program. You go through a set curriculum. We have weekly group Zoom calls, plus you also get one-on-one coaching. Such a big proponent of one-on-one conversations, one-on-one coaching to really pull out those best ideas for you. So as you go through the Thought Leader Academy, you work on your thought leadership messaging container, your signature talk, one for your keynote TED style talk, and then another one for your business presentation, lead generation signature talk. You also work on your visibility, your speaking fees and packages, your pitches, your speaking proposals, and of course, the confidence to put yourself out there and to deliver an outstanding message to your audience. Go to speakingyourbrand.com/academy to get all the details. Now, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the podcast, Christina.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me today, Carol. I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this interview for over a week, and I just can't thank you enough for the invitation.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you on because you've been doing a lot of TV in the past year and a half because you are a pharmacist, specifically in the area of public health, which of course with COVID, that's exactly what has been the top of all of our minds. So can you tell our listeners a little bit more about what you do under the brand Public Health Pharmacist?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Dr. Christina Madison, and my brand is the Public Health Pharmacist. And over the past 20 months, I have had just an extraordinary opportunity to really kind of be what my good friends like to call me is the Dr. Fauci of Las Vegas, because I'm literally that one, public health expert and, healthcare professional that they have that comes on, breaking news, anything related to COVID, anything related to the vaccines and the pandemic, they call me to come on and to try to, digest it in a way that's understandable for the public. Obviously, I'm a clinical pharmacist by training, but I spent a large chunk of my career working in a public health department. And so I had already gone through another pandemic, which was H1N1. And then now, dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, it was really this amazing sort of constellation of things happening all at once, where it was my background and my expertise that met an opportunity and then really perfect timing. And then I did have some media training prior to being asked, but definitely not to the scale and the scope of what was being asked of me. And so I'm really excited to kind of get into that. And the fact that I really just kind of leaned into being this, this public health face, because, we really did have a lot of challenges with public health messaging at the beginning of the pandemic. So I do a lot of consulting work. I've helped with the vaccine rollout. I care for mainly vulnerable populations as my day job. I'm an associate professor of pharmacy practice, but at this point, I'm really dedicated to getting my brand out there and letting people know that I'm here to be a healthcare media contributor, expert, and keynote speaker. That is obviously for pay. That's something that I learned from you, is that you got to put that out there. If you want to be a paid speaker, you need to tell people you're a paid speaker.
Yes.
So I've learned all kinds of little nuggets of gold from you, Carol. So that's just a little bit about me, and I'm super excited to dive into questions.
Well, Christina, I just first want to say thank you so much for being an advocate for public health and for vaccines during this time period. I'm sure it has not always been easy, especially being in the public eye on the media. I know I have faced a lot of sexist backlash from being a political analyst on TV news for the past 15 years. And I'm sure you have experienced some unpleasant things because of that. So I just want to say thank you so much for doing the very important work that you've been doing.
Yeah, it's definitely not for the faint of heart. So one thing that I always tell people is, if you choose to do this and try to do this on a regular basis, do not look at the comments on Twitter. Do not look at them at all. Because I did one time and it was bad. So, I am a woman of color, for those of you guys who are listening and may not be able to see me. And so I truly feel that representation matters, and it's not just the message, but the messenger. And when that is packaged in such a way that people tune out because they don't see someone that looks and sounds like them, that's also another reason why I've kind of stepped up and leaned into this, is because I do know that there is a lack of representation in the media, in particular for women of color. So that's another reason why I'm very happy to kind of hold this mantle and to do my best to make sure that, that's being communicated and being communicated well. But yeah, I've heard, horror stories about, other people looking at the comments, or, people trying to contact you through Facebook or social media to ask you questions about a story that you did, and it was completely taken out of context. One time my husband was like, "Don't read it." And of course, he told me not to read it. So then, of course, I went and read it. And so I looked, and it's the person's like, "Can't you find a white doctor? And why'd you choose her? She's only a pharmacist." Oh God. Yeah. Horrible things. That was more towards the beginning. So now I don't try to look at the comments, but it's definitely not like that now. But again, not for the faint of heart. So you are correct in that mindset.
Yeah. And I'm going to share one story, but for those of you listening, please do not let us dissuade you from pitching your local TV. We're going to talk about all the benefits that you get. And to Christina's point, just don't look at the comments. Whatever positive may be there does not matter, just because it's going to be vastly outweighed by that one negative comment that's going to stick in your mind forever. So back election night 2016, of course, didn't turn out quite as we had hoped. So I was in the news studio starting 4 p.m. that afternoon, getting ready for 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m. because I live in Florida, of course.
The returns were coming in.
A huge state, waiting for the returns to come in. And so in between our TV segments, myself as a Democratic analyst and my Republican counterpart, who was a male, and we would do Facebook Lives through the news studio's Facebook page because they wanted us to do that. And I, of course, wasn't looking at their Facebook page at the time when we were doing these streams, but my Republican counterpart was on his phone after we did it. And he turned to me, he's like, Carol, don't read the comments. They are so sexist. And I said, well, number one, I'm not surprised. And number two, that's exactly why I don't read the comments.
Yeah. So I feel like you and I are very similar in that regard, because it is one of those sensitive topics. And I think, unfortunately, because of the politicization of mask wearing and mandates and vaccinations, it's very touchy. And, there's been times where I've been asked to do stories that I felt were too potential for political leanings. And I've told them no, because I really pride myself on being very apolitical and really just giving people the facts, because science is science. Science isn't one way or the other. It's not right or left. It's just, it is what it is. These are the facts. And I think because in the very beginning, we tried to kind of sugarcoat things related to the pandemic, it made people distrust the science and made people distrust the CDC, the NIH, the WHO, right? Because they thought, oh, they must be covering something up in China. They sent us this virus and, it's manufactured by man. And, there was so much misinformation, right? We know that there's just a tsunami of misinformation. And so as much good as you and I try to put out there, it's like one negative story just like pushes everything down.
Yes. Well, and this is why I keep doing the political analysis on TV, even after over 15 years, because I want a woman there in that seat, because I know it's so often, I see the panels they put together, even here locally in Orlando where I live, and it tends to be mostly men. And so the news directors will reach out to me like, Carol, we really want, and a lot of the news directors are actually women. So they reach out to me like, we really want a woman on this panel. And if I can't make it or I can't do it, I will recommend another woman that I know here, and especially a woman of color.
Which is phenomenal. So thank you for that.
Yes.
It's so needed.
Yeah, the messenger representation is so incredibly important, as well as just the diversity and experiences that we bring to the topic because of our lived experience, which is different than who we normally see on TV. All right, so hopefully we haven't scared all of you from TV. So Christina, before we get into some of the details about how you got your first TV appearance and how you prepare for your TV segments and kind of the details about how TV segments work, let's talk about some of the benefits so we can kind of like even out the discussion here. And what have been the benefits that you have seen? And I'll share one of them here with the listeners, is that you were just recently named one of the 50 most influential leaders in pharmacy in an awards and recognition program. So, and this was a peer review process that received thousands of votes. And I know that you had said when you mentioned this to me that you believe that it was really these TV and media appearances that set you apart and that helped you to get this recognition. So in addition to that, what are the other benefits you've seen?
Obviously, I was very shocked and honored by getting that recognition, because it's, the most influential, pharmacy leaders across the country. Not just that, but then I looked at the list and I was in the top 10, and I was like, holy moly, right? So, and I really credit that to the fact that I solidified my brand very early on when I started this process of starting my consulting business. So when I first launched my website in November of 2019, everything was the same. All my branding across all social media platforms, everything launched. I was very strategic about it. I launched everything on the same day. And then I had a very specific schedule about how I posted things. So in the beginning, I made sure I posted at least once a week. And then as I started getting more content, then I started posting things every few days. And then now I post pretty much every day. And then I have specific themes for each day. So I always do like a Monday motivation, Tuesday tips, Wednesday wow. Thursday is kind of just like my day for, mostly like public health information and like facts, like what's going on for the week. And then Friday, I tend to do a feature on a fellow healthcare professional or somebody else who's in the media or somebody else who I think that my audience should follow, or somebody else who I think is doing something that should be taken notice of. And so that took a little bit of time, but I was very strategic in the beginning about my professional brand. And so the other thing too is that I had some really good advice very beginning of when I started doing this. And so I actually hired an entertainment attorney to help me with contract negotiation to make sure that my voice and my likeness was not being exploited. So that was some really great advice I got from somebody who is a voice actor, who happens to also be a pharmacist. So I was very lucky because that advice, I think, really set me up for success. And then going through that entertainment attorney helped me with other things. So I went and got my trademarking. So my brand is now trademarked, which is super exciting, right? So that was really, a big deal for me. And then I've gotten a ton of recognition. So just for instance, obviously this, 50 most influential pharmacy leaders is huge. And that was by the Pharmacy Podcast Network, which, they get 100,000 individual downloads a month. They've got multiple podcast hosts. So it's great recognition, but I've also had other things that have happened to me. So I just went to a professional pharmacy meeting just a few weeks ago, and I literally had a student come up to me and goes, "Hey, aren't you the public health pharmacist? You're famous." And I was like, it was very shocking because first of all, I don't think of myself as being famous, but in the pharmacy world, I am a face that is now out there and is now not just part of the pharmacy world, but beyond. And so because I've been able to really translate that to other mediums, I think other pharmacists look at that as like, hey, this person is like really getting themselves out there and is really establishing themselves. And not only that, but really bringing attention to the profession. And so that's helped me to get keynote addresses that are paid.
Good.
Right?
Yes.
Very important. Very important. It's helped me to get national recognition. I've been asked to do multiple panel discussions at the national level that I don't think that I would have been asked to do if I didn't have all of this exposure.
Yeah, absolutely, Christina. And I know you are excellent at LinkedIn because I follow you on LinkedIn and you are so consistent with your posting. I enjoy your post, which is not true for everyone who posts on LinkedIn, including my own. Like I'm working on getting better at it. But I love that you share the events that you're going to. And I know you've been recognized for different organizations in Las Vegas where you live. And so I definitely see you being on TV and establishing, like you said, your brand so strongly in the beginning, but then adding the TV and media appearances on top of it has just taken you to the next level. And this episode here is a part of the series that we're doing called The Medium is the Message. And we're really analyzing what makes each medium unique and how we can use it most effectively and what are the benefits it conveys to us. And for television, it really is a matter of not everyone can do it. Not everyone is on TV. Everyone can be on TikTok. Everyone can be on Instagram. Everyone can be on YouTube. Everyone can have an email list. And those are amazing things. And I'm so glad that we all have equal access to all of those platforms. Yet TV, there are still gatekeepers because someone has to select you to be on TV. You have to be found or you have to pitch yourself. And then you get selected and you're one of a very few. And so you mentioned that student came up to you and said, you're famous. And that's really what being on TV conveys. There's a little bit of a celebrity status that you don't get from social media platforms or from videos on the internet.
It is really interesting, right? It's almost as if because television is the medium, it lends itself to automatic credibility.
Yes.
Right. And it's like, because not everyone is on TV, and like you said, there are gatekeepers, it's as if, that 15 minutes of fame almost gets extended because not everybody gets to be on TV. And it's like, well, how'd you do that? And, some people think it's luck and some people think that it's, just who you know. And a lot of times people are like, oh, you live in Vegas. It must be so easy for you just call a friend and get on TV. No, that's not how it works. There is a process. I will say that if you do have a passion for it and it is something that you are interested in, I will say that most media markets are always looking for something that's newsworthy. And so therefore, if you're pitching yourself and you're pitching yourself on a regular basis, the likelihood of you being chosen increases. However, I will say getting your foot in the door and being that known quantity, right? Because you want to be that known quantity. You want to be that person that's reliable, that's dependable, that is accessible, and that responds right away, because the media cycle is so quick. Like I think the quickest turnaround I've had was 30 minutes, especially now with Zoom, because a lot of the interviews are Zoom. The stations here are just now barely starting to do stuff on location. And then I've only done two. I've done two in studio appearances in the last like 3 months, but it's just barely starting. And then we start doing it and then we get another surge in cases. And so everyone's like freaked out and doesn't want to be in the studio anymore. So I would say, that's, I think the biggest reason why I've had such success is because of my accessibility and because I respond right away. So a lot of healthcare professionals, the reason why you see kind of the same talking heads is, one is they're most likely on retainer, and they are beholden to just one station. So there's that. And the other reason is that depending on what their full-time job is, they may not have the flexibility to be able to get on a Zoom call or jump in a live feed and be able to comment on breaking news, because they may be in the middle of seeing patients. They may be in a classroom lecturing, right? Which is like me, my full-time job is that I'm associate professor, but luckily I have flexibility within my schedule. So I tell the reporters that, and I try to feed them, some ideas. I'm like, hey, these are things that are likely going to come up this week. ACIP is meeting this week, so you're probably going to have some breaking news coming soon. Or, I just heard that FDA was going to review this data. You guys should be thinking about maybe getting the story ready for that. So those are the things that I actually have a media coach. That took me some time, but I hired a media coach in order to help me with some of the strategies, because my goal now is not just to be the Dr. Fauci of Las Vegas, but to be America's favorite doctor of pharmacy. So I'm actually in the process of starting to pitch myself to national, news outlets. And so that's a big deal. It's a big deal for me to think about kind of getting this brand more than just my local network, which, by the way, Vegas is a big market, but I want to go bigger.
Oh, I love this, Christina. And you definitely have obviously the expertise and the credentials and now the experience to do so. So I love that. And you don't need to be the Dr. Fauci. You can be the Dr. Madison.
Well, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And so to your point about being on retainer. So as I mentioned, I've been doing political analysis on TV news for 15 years. And most of the time I have not been on retainer. I just float to whatever news station needs me, whether it's the NBC station, the CBS station, the Fox 35 station, et cetera. But in 2016, I was under contract, under retainer with our NBC affiliate. So I was paid for that year and I was exclusive to them. So I would not, because they wanted to lock me in. And as we got closer to election season, I was in the studio 3 days a week, at least, for the debates, breaking news, obviously for election coverage. And then to your point, and this was obviously way pre-COVID. So they would, if there was a breaking news story, they would send out a crew to my house to get me to record a segment, a stand-up, or I would drive into the studio to do something quick. And that's why they wanted me under contract, was because I needed to be available when they needed me. So then in 2018, they wanted me to do it again for our Florida midterm election. And I said I couldn't do it because Speaking Your Brand was getting so busy. I knew I couldn't be as readily accessible as I was in 2016. So then now I've just been floating again since then. So there's definitely pros and cons to both of them.
Yeah, and I would agree 100%. So, for me personally, I have not been under retainer with any of the stations here in town. And that is because I do have aspirations to go bigger. And I know that if I go under contract, that will limit my ability to do anything with a bigger network. So like a CNN or MSNBC or a Fox. And then the other thing too is that a lot of people don't realize this, but if you are seeing people on TV, it's actually the reverse. Most people don't understand that it's usually unpaid, but if you are wanting to get on, it's usually pay to play. So people are always like, oh my God, you must be killing it. You're on TV all the time. And I'm like, nope, because it's the way that the media market is now, because of all of the competition around advertising dollars, it's not profitable for them to pay contributors. It doesn't get profitable until you start doing like regular stuff like what you were doing with your political analyzing, and then also at the national level, right? Because at that point, once you're exclusive and you're under contract, again, it goes back to that accessibility that you just mentioned, and that's what they're paying for. They're paying for you to literally be able to come and comment on a dime. And so I've been able to do some of that. I mean, obviously I have a family, and so I tell them that, and they're very understanding. But for the most part, if they give me between, 2.5 hour lead in, I can get myself to a point where I can be in a space where I can do a Zoom, or I use a co-working space, which is where I am right now. And there's lots of different places where you can do, a pretty nice set and a background. So they can come here. It's central in the city. So if they give me an hour, I'll tell them, hey, you guys can meet me here and we can do the shot here. And so that makes it really convenient as well. And then at the very beginning, before the pandemic and before everything shut down and we couldn't do in studio, I actually used to keep a media bag in my car. So I would have hair, makeup, clothes, because the clothes that you wear matter if you're in studio, because when they mic you and you're a woman, you don't want to have to take off all your clothes to put the mic on.
Oh, so many men's hands down my back, adding mic packs to my bra strap. I know.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. So, you get to a point where you're like, okay, mix and match. I'm going to have like a million different tops and skirts, and hopefully it has pockets so it can hold the mic. the mic pack, so that it's not like sitting in the small of your back. So you're like standing up to like a foot. Anyway, you understand.
The struggle is real. The struggle is real.
Yeah, I mean, these are all the things that I don't. It's funny. Before I started doing this, I did not know how the sausage was made, and now that I know how the sausage is made, it's so funny because now I'm looking at people when they're on and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can totally tell this person is completely uncomfortable. Like I can see it in their face, and I'm thinking to myself, oh yeah, they probably were not thinking that was going to be an issue when they wore that dress, or where they were going to put it, or even just the color of the mic, right? So that's the other thing too. Like there are now flesh colored mics that are more tan that match me. That is new, that wasn't always available. So, that kind of stuff, it makes a big difference. And, if you're wearing something that is closer to your body tone, for me, I'm kind of like a mocha color. It's a big contrast. If you've got like a jet black mic or like a white mic, it's like your eye goes to that and it doesn't go to what the person is saying. So, what you wear, how you look, the consistency, all of those things matter because you don't want things to distract from your message. And so all of those things are things that I did not know at the beginning of this. So as much as I had the entertainment background, because I used to be a professional cheerleader before I went to pharmacy school, and I'm a typical only child and wanted to like please. And so I always had that performer background. And so when I became a faculty member, it was perfect because I was in front of all these students and I could do all this education, but I really looked at it as an opportunity to be there for their edutainment. And so for me, taking that skill and then putting it in front of the camera was a really easy transition. But for most people, that's potentially not the case because, first of all, people have, big fears of public speaking, which I did not have. People have fear of being on camera, which I did not have. People have a fear of being judged by multiple people. I never had. I was, cheering in front of stadiums of thousands of people. So I never had those fears. So the transition from clinical pharmacist to being in front of a television, camera was not that big of a stretch for me. But I don't think everybody has that kind of, ease of transition.
Yeah, you were ready. You were ready made. You were ready made for this role, Christina. You really were. I didn't know you're a professional cheerleader. I can see that in you now. I love it. It's so perfect. All right. So Christina, let us back up. And can you tell us, how did your very first TV appearance come about? How did that come to you?
Okay, so this is such a great story. It was January 29th of 2020. And I remember the date because it was the same day that WHO declared at the time, novel coronavirus an epidemic. So at the time, I had actually been following the story from Wuhan. My husband actually used to live in China and speaks fluent Mandarin. And so we were kind of following the story just because he had friends there and was kind of concerned about them. And so we, from a public health standpoint, I was like, okay, what's going on? This is an interesting thing. And so, I knew about SARS, I knew about MERS, we all knew about bird flu. I had gone through H1N1 being embedded in the public health department. So I understood contact tracing and, mitigation and points of distribution and, all of that stuff I had already gone through. And so I was looking at this going, okay, this could get bad, right? So I was following the story. I was posting about it on social media, and my university reached out to me and said, hey, we had a local news station reach out to us and say, do you have anybody on faculty that could speak to this new novel coronavirus? And at the time, we had only had one identified case in the United States, and it still hadn't been confirmed yet. And so this never happens. They gave me 2 days. They gave me a 2-day lead in. This never happens, right? So I was like, woo! So I had time to actually prepare for this interview. So they asked me on a Tuesday, and the interview was on a Thursday. So I was like, okay, great. So I contact my friend. That's my media coach. She's an Emmy Award-winning journalist and used to be a primetime news anchor here in town. And so I contacted her and I said, Petrania, I got this interview and they didn't send me any questions. What do I do? And she goes, this is what you do. Call the station, get the name of the producer for the segment, because it was for the midday show and it was going to be live. She's like, get their name, get their email, and you send them the questions that you want to answer and send them all the references and all the information and everything that you have, so that when you show up, they only ask you what you're comfortable with. And I was like, oh, okay, this seems like it could be okay. And I was like, are you sure they're going to give me that information? She was like, no worries. They're going to give it to you. And I was like, all right. So that's what I did. I cold called the station, asked for the information. They gave it to me over the phone. I emailed her and she thanked me. And when I showed up, they were like, you were the most prepared guest we've ever had. And some of the information that I gave them, they actually created infographics that they had up on the screen while I was talking, that they used the information that I sent to them. So I end the interview. And of course, this is the first time I've done something this significant. And obviously it's a big deal because this is coronavirus. And I'm sitting there and the anchor looks at me and he goes, that was really great. Have you done this before? And I was like, yeah. And I totally lied.
Love it.
Because I wanted to get asked back.
Right. Yes.
And to this day, that station still gives me the most work.
Oh my gosh, Christina. First of all, I love that you just call the station, get the information. And the producer was probably thinking, thank you so much for doing this work for me, because they have a gazillion things that they're doing. They were probably so incredibly appreciative of you for having put all that information together, and hence even more reason to keep calling you back.
Seriously, I always say it's my expertise and my preparation met an opportunity with perfect timing. Because here's the thing, if I hadn't had all of that background, I almost feel the over a decade that I spent working in the health department and all of this public health knowledge prepared me for that exact moment in time. Because otherwise, I don't know if they would have had somebody that would have understood kind of the background behind it, because, I'm credentialed with the Academy of HIV Medicine. I spent a decade working in a tuberculosis clinic. So I actually knew all of the stuff that would potentially actually end up being the recommendations for how we treated COVID. And the fact that it was on surfaces, all of that stuff I knew from when I used to work in TB. We had ultraviolet light, HEPA filtration, negative pressure rooms. I know how viruses mutate because, of course, I've been working with those affected and infected with HIV for over 15 years. And so it was like tuberculosis and HIV had a baby, and it was COVID-19. And it was like, I had all this knowledge honestly, I have no idea. I mean, it was literally just the most perfect storm ever.
Well, Christina, you are definitely the right person for the right time. And it reminds me that I read over the summer, I believe it came out in the summer, Michael Lewis's book, which he wrote Moneyball and Liar's Poker. And he's a fantastic writer. I just love his writing, but he wrote a book called Premonition, which was about the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially early 2020, like the first half of 2020. And one of his main characters, a real woman, but one of his main characters is a public health official named Dr. Charity Dean, and she's in California. And she was, of course, was facing a lot of pushback during early 2020 as they were trying to prepare public health departments in California to get ready for COVID-19 and the impact it was going to have. And there's this one quote, and I put this on LinkedIn and Instagram back months ago, and I pulled this from the story. This is what she said, Dr. Charity Dean. "Men like that always underestimate me," she said. "They think my spirit animal is a bunny and it's a fucking dragon."
That's awesome.
Because she was just not backing down about what needed to get done. And of course, she, got pushed around and underestimated all the time. Anyways, fantastic book, The Premonition by Michael Lewis. Okay, Christine, let's go back. So I love how you got your first TV appearance, and obviously you did an excellent job. And I assume on your website, you have some clips. TV clips, so we can send listeners there so they can look at them?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually have a reel that I use when I pitch myself. And so my reel, if they want to check it out, it's actually on my YouTube channel, just the Public Health Pharmacist on YouTube. And so if you go to the very first clip is that clip of me being in studio for that January 29th interview, which, by the way, the reason why I remember the date so vividly is because I was so pleased with myself, right? I was taking pictures of myself in the studio. I was so excited, right? Because I was I'm going to post this on social media. So I leave the station, get in my car. I'm on, cloud nine. I drive maybe a mile, and they call me and they say, "Can you come back to the studio right now?" And I was like, "Oh my God, what did I do wrong?" No. When I left, the WHO had declared the novel coronavirus epidemic, and they wanted me to come back and comment.
That's incredible.
So they had me come back and do another live.
Incredible. All right. We'll make sure to include a link to your website, obviously your LinkedIn, and to your reel here in the show notes so listeners can see that. Now, Christina, so you mentioned how you prepared for your first TV appearance. You thought of the questions, you sent it to them, which is fantastic. Now, imagine that you only get a couple hour notice and they want you to come in and talk about something. Now, one thing that's not nice about the pandemic, but you know what I mean? We can do this from Zoom, from home. So it saves time. You don't have to travel to the studio. We can do a lot of the research, ahead of time. So how do you prepare for your TV segments when you only have a very short notice and they tell you, we need to do a segment, in 2 hours time from now, we're going to kind of talk about ABC. What do you do?
So the first thing that I typically will do is look to see if there's any big announcements from FDA, CDC, WHO, if there's any, new articles or papers that have been published that I can cite during my interview. I'm really big on making sure that I cite evidence-based medicine because I have such a really good relationship with the reporters now, because they just all contact me directly, is I'll ask them hey, what direction are you trying to go with this story? So I ask them a few questions first to see sort of what direction they're trying to go. And then I try to tailor my responses based on the direction that they're trying to go. The other reason why I ask it that way is also to make sure that I'm not getting trapped into getting asked a question that's politically loaded or uber controversial, like, so something about like, abortion, or like, something like really like hot button that's like, it doesn't matter what side you're on, you're wrong kind of thing. And so I really try to make sure that I get a good grasp of where they're going, because at this point, I can decline things. It's okay. In the beginning, I didn't think I could do that, right? Because I was still trying to establish myself as an expert. But now I'm okay with saying, I don't really feel comfortable, talking about that, but I can, refer you to somebody else. That's the other thing too, is I kind of have a couple other people that I will refer out to, or if it's a big story, and I have like a patient that I can bring in, because that's the other thing too. They always like to get like the real person aspect of it. And so I always try to keep like somebody on tap that like is comfortable in front of the camera. So just for instance, there was a story about the COVID-19 boosters for people 18 years and up. So that story just came out. And then also the shots for kids. And at that point, I was actually doing a vaccine clinic, and my husband hadn't gotten his booster yet, and neither had my mom. And so I had asked them to come so that they could get their boosters, and they brought my daughter. And so my daughter, unfortunately, is too little to get vaccinated, but I did have pediatric vaccines at the clinic. And so they spun the story, and my husband always looks camera ready. And I'm like so jealous. Like the man can just like, wear a paper bag and he looks gorgeous. So I basically told them, I was like, hey, you could use my husband for the story, and that's what they ended up doing. So they used my husband, and then they did some B-reel, because my mom was watching my daughter, and my daughter is actually really tall for her age. So she looks like she's a 5-year-old. So it was perfect. So they talked about peds doses, they talked about booster doses, and then they also talked about community engagement. And so it ended up working out, but like you always kind of like need that like in your back pocket. So it helps them with crafting the story. So as much as I prepare, I always try to like feed them a little something too, so that it helps to make me look in a good light, but then also it helps them with their story. So I always try to send them reference information afterwards, or if I have an infographic that they can use that's part of the package, I send them that too. And it just, it makes their job easier. Anything you can do to make their job easier, to help them tell their story, it makes it work. And so obviously there are instances where I literally go in cold and I have no freaking clue what they're going to ask me, but they're few and far between, because I try to do my homework.
That's excellent, Christina. And to your point about them shooting B-roll of your mother and your daughter, and then your husband, and kind of, getting vaccinated, is that TV is a visual medium. And even though they'll have talking heads, CNN has their talking heads and local news stations have their talking heads, they really do want to cut away to some type of B-roll that shows activity, that shows action, that shows people doing things, because that's what we want to see on TV. We don't just want to see two people having a conversation like we're doing right now. But on the podcasting is a very different medium, which I talked about several episodes ago, than TV. So when you're pitching for a TV segment, include a mention of some visuals that would go along with your topic, your segment, because that's going to help them to prepare for that and to give a better sense of why they should have you do this TV segment, because what are the visuals that would go along with it?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the reason how they ended up coming to this event was I started on the advice of my coach. She basically told me, like, you should put down all of the different things that you're going to do for the week, right? So like on Mondays, I typically will have a list of all the different places I am for the week. And I send that to my media contacts. And so they already kind of have an idea of if I'm doing some sort of community service event, or if I'm doing vaccinations, or if I'm, out in the community somewhere, because it's like Insta story. And they're like, oh yeah, Dr. Madison's going to be here. Let's see if she's okay with us coming, So that's the other thing too about this, is that the media is always looking for something that is newsworthy. And so I highly encourage people to continue to pitch. Even if your stuff doesn't get picked up right away, if you continue to pitch and you continue to have good sources, they will come back to you, right? Or in my instance, I was getting at the point where I had really good content, but they were using me so much that they needed to get like some different faces, which is totally fine. But what they would end up doing is they would take my content and then they would end up using a different person. but the content they would still source to me. So that's the other part of this too. With media, you've got your what's live that's actually goes on the television, but then there's a whole other section where you've got their website, and then you've got the copy that goes in the website version of the story, and then you've got the Twitter version of the story. So make sure that whatever you're doing, it can be used for all of those, right? So it's not just the what comes on the 5 o'clock or the 6 o'clock news, because they will repackage it. Because I've had people tell me, I've gone to work and they'll be like, oh, I woke up this morning and saw you on my TV. And I'm like, that's interesting, because I was interviewed like 2 days ago. But that's what they do. They will repackage it and they will put it into a different segment, or they'll put it for, if it was originally posted for the 11 o'clock news, they'll repackage it for the morning news. So, you want to have quotable things, right? Unfortunately, you have to talk in sound bites because that's just how the cycle is. And don't be sad if they only show you and your face for 10 seconds of the segment, right? I always say that, I'm blessed if I get more than 15 seconds in a row without them showing B-reel in between my face. And that is because that's just the medium. That's the way that the medium works. And those short clips, they can use, and they can use them on Twitter. They can use them on the website. I did a story about a week ago on Thanksgiving safety and COVID. I said the best Thanksgiving guest is a vaccinated Thanksgiving guest. And so they loved it. And my story was like the second trending story for like 3 or 4 days, because I was able to give them a soundbite that they could use, right? And that was at the top of the story. And so those are the kinds of things that don't come naturally, but you kind of just have to get into this groove where, you have to talk in sound bites, and you really need to think about your talking points. So everything that I do, I have kind of a list of things that I want to make sure get said. And then at the very end of your interview, they'll say, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Always say something else. Never, ever, ever get to the point where you say, no, that's it. No. Always have something else, and always make sure that it's on brand.
Oh, Christina. Yes, that is so good. And to your point about having something quotable in sound bites, and it's true. And I know we chatted about this before we hit record, that you have 3 or 4 minutes for an entire segment. And in my case, I would include myself, my Republican counterpart, and the reporter, plus any B-roll lead-in that they would do. So I was lucky to talk for 30 seconds total. My face would maybe be on for 5 seconds here, 5 seconds there before they showed something else, like one of the political rallies. But you do have to learn how to make a point in a very short amount of time. And here's another thing about TV. It's a mass market audience. Unlike podcasts, even unlike your social media feed or your YouTube channel, it's mass market. It's a general audience. And so you have to talk at their level, like a layperson level, that they can quickly understand while they're making dinner or while they're getting ready for work in the morning.
Yeah, one of the best things that I did at the very beginning of the pandemic, when we were talking about vaccines, when they were first coming out and people were very confused about like the difference between messenger RNA and like the viral vector and all these different things, is the greatest analogy that I heard was that messenger RNA vaccines are like the Snapchat of vaccines. And they went crazy. They were like, this is the best. This is the best analogy I've ever heard. And I'm like, I tweaked it a little bit from the person that I heard it from. And I actually don't even remember where I initially heard it. But I would explain the vaccine that way. And I'm like, it goes into your cell. It doesn't touch your DNA. So it's not going to change your DNA. It literally shows your cells how to manufacture the antibodies against COVID-19. It shows it a picture. And then it goes away within like minutes to hours. So it can't hurt you. And it's not the virus. It's literally the Snapchat of vaccines. And they were like, this is perfect. And so like coming up with stuff like that, that's like really catchy. It takes time, but I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of other healthcare media contributors. I have my favorites that, I know that they're reputable sources. I listen to everybody because I know that I will get a little bit here and a little bit there from someone else, and I can make it my own. But it's also a way for me to make sure that I'm staying on my game because I'm like, oh, I hadn't heard that before. So then I go and I look it up and I make sure that I know where the source material is. And, that's luckily because I practice in infectious disease and in public health. It's something I already would have had to do because of my faculty appointment. I just now am repackaging it in a way that is digestible to the public and is useful for the media.
Well, Christina, you have a lot harder job than I do on TV because I get to just have my opinions and share them. I don't have to cite any sources. I like to say that I get paid to share my political opinions, which is always nice. I mean, obviously, but I'll prepare, like when I prepare to go on a segment, I'll do lots of research. I get like lots of whatever the polling, different polls are showing, whatever like different policies are being talked about. Like I will have I'll have pages of notes as I'm preparing for stuff. And then I'll go back and like prioritize and highlight things. So I do my research, but I also get to share a lot of opinions. Okay, so you mentioned about continuing to pitch even if you don't get selected right away, and thinking about how to make your pitches newsworthy. Now, obviously, Christina, with your expertise and with the public health and the pandemic, it's kind of like quote unquote easier. I'm sure a lot of listeners think for you to pitch because it's so newsworthy. So in our Thought Leader Academy, one of our coaches, Marie Feedback, she does lots of TV as well. And so what she says is that think of all of the holidays that come about, like for regular entrepreneurs like us, where it's not something that is necessarily newsworthy just on its face, but there's literally a holiday for everything. So find a holiday or something that's going on that you can connect to your subject matter, to your topic, and then pitch them related to that. And so just for those of you listening, there are always ways to find something to make your topic newsworthy, but you definitely have to find an angle for that and pitch that to the news station, not just, oh, I'm the owner of such and such business. Can you bring me on to talk about the work I do? No, the answer is no. Like Christina said earlier, they'll be glad to charge you an advertising fee to come on and do that, but they're not going to bring you on as a TV contributor.
Great point. And one of the things that I did at the beginning of 2020 was I actually went and did an entire list for the whole year of all the awareness days and months related to healthcare. So even if it wasn't related to public health, I went through and like checked the dates. So like November is diabetes awareness, it's Alzheimer's awareness. Rural Health Day was last week. So, my husband helps me with like some of my graphics. And so I send him all those dates in advance. And he creates the graphics for me, but then I also make sure that that's part of my my top topics for the week that I send out to my media contacts. And I'm like, hey, these are things that I can speak on this week. Or, hey, did you know that December 1st is World AIDS Day? And I'm credentialed with the Academy of HIV Medicine, so I can talk on that too. Or, I have a media coaching client that I'm working with right now, and she's a marriage and family therapist. And I told her, I said, this is a perfect time for us to pitch you because people are stressed out around the holidays and everyone's thinking about like New Year's resolutions. And I was like, we got to get you going because we want to start pitching you because these are the like feel good stories and things that the stations want to fill in with all this like hard COVID news. Right. And so, those are the kinds of things that it takes a little while to kind of figure out where you can fit. But again, going back to that, keep pitching yourself. Mental health is a big thing right now, just in general. And so having somebody that is a marriage and family therapist, works on relationships, I think just her being her is a great resource for the media, just because that's always something that's timely. And then even with you, like as a political analyst, I mean, obviously this has been a very tumultuous year for politics.
5 years, 6 years. I mean, yeah. Who's counting? I know. It's honestly, I was so exhausted the night after the morning after the election in 2016 that I was like, I don't know if I can ever do this again for an entire year. It was brutal. All right. So Christina, what is next for you? So you mentioned you've done some keynote speaking, some paid keynote speaking. Obviously you are pitching for some national TV media exposure. What else?
Well, the next thing that I started doing is I actually started bringing on coaching clients. So clients that are healthcare professionals that want to get into the media. So I created this 10 media tips for healthcare professionals quick and dirty tips. And then after that, people are like, well, hey, like, can you help me? Like, is there some other stuff I can do? And so, it wasn't something that, came really, it was more because somebody asked. And, I hadn't thought of, me being a coach necessarily, but I do think that there's a niche for it, in particular for healthcare professionals, because let's be honest, healthcare professionals are not often taught how to run a business. They're not taught how to do professional speaking, right? We're told, take care of the patient, do no harm. And so it's a different skill set. Obviously the whole hair and makeup and being camera ready thing is a whole new skill set as well. And so, so I've had a couple of clients. I have a new client right now. Like I said, she's a marriage and family therapist, and she's really interested in getting herself out there and really solidifying her brand and really destigmatizing mental health is kind of her claim to fame. And so she came to me and said, hey, can you help me? And so, so that's kind of my new thing right now. But I really just think the sky's the limit. And, again, going back to that representation, I think is really important. I was telling you a story about my daughter, who's 3.5, right after the election and they declared, Joe Biden as the winner. They had them, everybody up on stage. They had Kamala Harris, and, we were all at home, commemorating the event and watching it on the TV. And my daughter went, Mommy, on the TV. And I went, oh, honey, that's not Mommy. That's that's the vice president. That's Kamala Harris. And she went, oh, okay. But the thing that was such a realization to me is that my child doesn't have any recollection of a world where her mother isn't on television, which is just crazy to me, because in her mind, everybody's mommy gets to be on the TV. She doesn't understand how unique that is. Yeah, it was definitely a point of pride for me.
Well, Christina, I wish you much success. I know I'm going to see you on a national TV station coming soon. So definitely, keep me posted. Let me know. I'll keep following you on LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much for coming on the Speaking Your Brand podcast.
Thank you so much, Carol, for the opportunity, and continued success to you as well.
Thank you again to Christina for coming on the podcast. She is a wealth of information, and I'm so excited to see her go even bigger. Don't forget that enrollment is now open for our next Thought Leader Academy group. We start in January 2022, and you can apply today. Go to speakingyourbrand.com/academy to get all the details and to submit your application form. Next week, we're continuing our series, The Medium is the Message, talking all about email. The week after that will be about social media. And then we're going to end the series talking all about writing books. Make sure to hit subscribe or follow in your podcast app so you don't miss any of these upcoming episodes. Until next time, thanks for listening.